Welcome back to The Bridge. We have been following the Oregon football state playoffs for the last couple of weeks, and now we are down to the Final Four. Once again, joining us here on The Bridge from KGW, Nate Hanson. Nate, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm great, man, and this is the exciting time of the high school football season. We keep narrowing down the teams here.
So we're now in the Final Four. Three of the four teams, not surprises, but there is one kind of outlier. So let's start with them. Let's start with Barlow.
Yeah.
They're the number 9 team in the state, but kind of a surprise team here in the Final Four.
Yeah, they are a surprise team. They're 10-2 this year, so they've been really good, but they haven't had really a big win over a marquee program in the regular season, but they finally got one in the postseason against number 8 Sheldon. And then last week they had the bracket break for them favorably, so they faced number 16 Mountainside in the quarterfinal instead of top-ranked Tigard. And once again, they took care of business, beat Mountainside, and now they're in the semifinals for the first time since 1991, a historic season for the Bruins.
Now, into the rest of the Final Four. Like I mentioned, the other 3 teams, not a surprise at all. These are 3 of the top 4 teams that were ranked coming into the tournament. So let's start with number 4, Central Catholic, again, now in the Final Four.
Yeah, Central Catholic, and they're going to be taking on Barlow in the semifinals. They won the Mount Hood Conference this year, and this is a team who they're also 10-2 this year, and only one of their losses came to an Oregon team, which happened to be Jesuit in the Holy War. But ever since that loss, they've just been rolling, including through the playoffs, and they're really on a hot streak right now.
Number 3, Lake Oswego, again in the Final Four. Yeah. What's been their ride so far here in the tournament?
Well, they're the defending state champions, and they've been in the state semifinals each of the previous 2 years, but this year hasn't quite been as dominant as last year. They really rely on their running back, Casey Filkins. We've talked about him a bunch. He's heading to Stanford. In their win last week against Lake Ridge, the Lakers only threw the ball twice in their quarterfinal matchup. So that shows how run-heavy, run-dominant they are. They've trailed in the second half of each of their last 2 playoff games, but have found a way to come out victorious. Nevertheless, they're here in the semifinals once again.
We've talked about it a couple of times. Tigard was the number 1 overall seed. They went down early on in the playoffs. So Jesuit is kind of the de facto now favorite here in the semifinals. And Jesuit coming into this game, interestingly enough, kind of the favorite to win the state tournament, but not a true conference champion, co-champions.
Yeah, they were co-champions this year, mainly because they got off to a slow start this year. They started off 2-2, which included a non-conference loss to Lake Oswego, but they also dropped a game to Aloha, and so they ended up sharing the Metro League title with Aloha and with Beaverton. But ever since that loss to Aloha, after they start off 2-2, they have just been on a roll. Their closest game was last week in the quarterfinals against Tualatin, and they still won that game by 2 touchdowns. So the Crusaders are really rolling right now.
I know you mentioned it. Let's take a look at the matchup. So Barlow coming in here, like you mentioned, the bracket broke for them favorably, but now kind of the rubber meets the road as they go up against Central Catholic.
And these 2 teams, being Mount Hood competitors, have faced each other once before, and Central Catholic really dominated that matchup. They won 53-14, but it is worth noting that Barlow didn't have their best receiver playing. They were missing a key offensive lineman, so they would tell you we weren't at full strength going into that game. And like I said, they just find ways to win, and so they're here, and they're going to get a chance to a rematch against Central Catholic, who, as I said, dominated the earlier matchup.
And I know you know this from covering a lot of high school football. I mean, you can't always go back to those earlier matchups because especially at the high school level, teams do get better as the season goes along. And you mentioned Barlow also getting healthier. They're
getting healthier, and they've developed quite a bit, and they just have a way of finding a way to win games. Their last 4 games have each been decided by 5 points or less, and they just have some leadership on that team. Their quarterback, Jaron Hunter, seems to step up in the 4th quarter when it really matters, so you definitely can't count him out, but you should still consider Central Catholic the favorite going into this one.
Now, the other semifinal game, these 2 have been on a collision course since the beginning of the bracket. Jesuit, Lake Oswego.
And they faced each other in the regular season. Lake Oswego won that matchup 44-41, a real thriller, and they relied on Casey Filkins in that matchup. He ran for 225 yards, 4 touchdowns. The Lakers built a 17-0 lead, and they were able to hold off the Crusaders to win 44-41. This one, it's really 2 teams who are going to just try to run the ball at each other. Obviously, Lake Oswego with Casey Filkins, Jesuit has a really good running back of their own in Cade Wisher. He's rushed for more than 2,000 yards and 30 touchdowns this year. He's going to get a ton of carries for Jesuit. So if you're a person who likes throwing the ball, this may not be the semifinal matchup for you, but nevertheless, this is going to be a really exciting game to watch.
And one last thing, because in Oregon, weather is always going to be a factor, whether you're playing back in September or now heading into the playoffs. And this weekend, it's one of those things we don't quite know exactly what the weather is going to be. It could be a perfectly clear day, but it also could be rainy, could have rain and snow mix. There could be some weather issues this weekend.
There could be, which I think actually helps the teams who are here at this point, because they've mostly relied on really good running backs and really good running games to get here. But it will nevertheless be interesting. On the turf out there, they're playing out at Hillsborough Stadium. These two semifinal games could get a little slippery in terms of getting your footing. So it'll be interesting to see how weather plays a part in these games.
All right, there you go. There is your semifinal preview for the Oregon State Football Tournament. Of course, you can follow Nate on Twitter and also follow KGW with Friday Night Flights, and of course on KGW.com for all the high school football info. Nate, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
All right, there you go. Coming up next, we've got more of The Bridge on the way. Go nowhere.